I need some traction. You need some traction.
Thanks everybody for joining us on another Traction webinar, sponsored, put on by Boast.ai, Launch Academy, Growth Blazers, Founders Institute, Lazaridis Institute, and BCF Ventures. Another exciting episode here today. We've got Sydney Strader, Head of Customer Success at Catalyst Software, which I'm super excited to learn about today. Myself, I'm a revenue focused guy, and I just love how CS fits into growing that revenue side of things. So I'm excited to hear what you got to say today, some tips and tricks for everybody who's joining us here today.
Excited to dig in.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So you've spent 10 years.
Well, it's 10 years in CS.
10 years in CS. Okay.
A little under a year, September 2020 at Catalyst. So approaching a year in the fall.
Well, why don't you share with everybody what Catalyst is? And we can kind of
sure.
start with that. That'd be great.
Yeah, so Catalyst is a customer success platform. So a tool that is used by customer success teams to map all of their data into a centralized location and then to standardize the workflows of their customer success team off of that data. So an amazing opportunity, but also a high pressure position, I would say, leading CS at a CS organization that serves CS customers. I mean, the bar really doesn't get higher. That was part of the challenge behind the opportunity and why I was like, well, I don't think in my career there will be a higher bar than building CS for CS. And so, yeah, it's amazing. It's also a really incredible opportunity to work with the company who's building the tool that's so integral to your day-to-day and how you operate your own team firsthand. So a lot of like unique, very meta components to the role.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Talk about having to execute with best practices. It's like the whole Gong. It's like Gong, and I love Gong from a sales recording perspective. And then the Gong insights. It's like, we enable people in sales, and here's stats about it of how to do it the best way. And you're like, I see where you're going here. Good work.
Exactly.
Good work.
Yeah, they do a phenomenal job. Props to the Gong team. I have a lot of former colleagues that are over there. I'm just consistently impressed with what they put out. And yeah, to your point, just like very much living in their own world and sharing those insights with the market and with their customers to learn of the best of the best. So
yes, it certainly is. And for Catalyst, love to hear I guess a couple elements, because I love to get into like the role and how you think about it. Like when you joined, how big was the CS team? How big is it now? How big has the company gotten over the last few years? Would love to kind of get that background.
It's been wild. So when I joined in September, 3 was the size of the customer success team. And I was super thankful. They had already started to specialize a little bit. They broke out the implementation team to onboard our customers. We had a CSM and we had our support engineering team. And that was a person of one, Victoria. And the team's grown immensely. We are 12 now, another 5 open headcount immediately. We'll be over 20 by the end of the year. So it has been like a buckle up situation. The real challenge, and coming from InVision and when I stepped into a leadership role there, things were really like structured and solidified and kind of like silver plattered, which I have a deep appreciation for all the work that went into that. But certainly coming and clean slate, from scratch, not only building the team, but the processes associated with that as you scale. And it is a very like complex dynamic of prioritization and balance. And that's been a hard challenge, but a fun challenge at Catalyst. And I think the team overall, I think we're like at 70 now. I mean, it's just like hard. We just had a kick off with 2 more people that joined today. It's just like every week there's a handful of new folks coming in the door. So it's awesome to see the growth.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And is Catalyst at a Series B? Is that
we are at a Series B today. Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. So
March 2020, I think, was when that was raised, just as the world was about to turn before any of us saw it coming.
Right. Put that check in the bank and
exactly. Fuel the next stage of growth.
That's right. Exactly. Well, and I mean, it kind of fit right into the digital transformation acceleration that we saw over the work from home kind of COVID era, which I wonder how we'll look back at that back in the clear of like how fast that actually accelerated digital adoption. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. And I think it accelerated a lot of like the significance and importance of customer success, right? At the end of the day, like a microscope very quickly came down on like retaining your customers, expanding the growth of your customers. And at the core of that, customer success playing a fundamental role. And certainly that was a lot of the traction that we saw to help fuel after that Series B round of funding and the growth of our company since. It's been a matter of like, how do we keep up on the CS side to the demand of the sales team, which is a great problem to have as an an organization. But again, talking about that like high bar that you have for the customer experience you want to deliver, it's very hard to do that when you're stretched thin and those processes aren't defined. So we're getting there.
How long were you at Envision also?
I was there for about 3 years.
Amazing. And they, I mean, I have a funny story about fundraising and using Envision and how that,
Please tell me.
How that backfired slightly. So
oh no, I thought this was going to be a positive story. I was like, yeah, tell me everything.
Generally, it's a positive story because I love the product at Envision. I love being able to visualize what is in an entrepreneur's head before you go out and code it and build it. And I love the whole premise behind it. But for the most part, you could demo your vision to people, and some investors weren't sophisticated enough to tell what was what between a sandbox or if it was just Envision.
Sure.
Until I think it was Battery I was showing. Yeah. And they were like, so how do you like Envision? And I was like,
I know where this is going.
you know. So do you have a sandbox or a demo environment you can show me? And I'm like, no, not really.
Just a prototype, just a proof of concept.
Just prototype. And they're like, yeah, we're one of the seed investors in Envision. And I was like, right. Should have done my research. Yes, do your due diligence about your VCs and their portfolio companies before you pull that trick.
Amazing. No, it was an incredible ride. I feel so fortunate. I learned a lot, met such an incredible group of people, and also had exposure to the remote culture and the remote world. That was, I think, something that was so beneficial for us. We were kind of chatting beforehand, and we while everyone had to adjust to what it was like with kids at home or a significant other at home, or just the dynamics of the world and how that was changing, when the pandemic hit, we all were very fortunate that we were coming from a remote environment that the whole organization had operated against since its infancy. And I think that gave us definitely like a head start, and was actually an area that we could provide a lot of value to our customers in, because so many of our customers, especially in the collaboration space, were struggling immensely when their designers and developers weren't sitting beside each other in the office, and we're like, hey, there's actually insights that we can provide and value in terms of like how to work remotely and collaborate remotely and shift customers through that new motion that they were struggling to adhere to as everything was unraveling, in front of them. So it was very, very interesting time, but all in all, great experience at Envision, and super fortunate for all the friendships that have come out of it.
Yeah, and they've scaled considerably, I'm sure. So how big was that CS team when you were at Envision?
When that was, so 45 was the global CS team that I oversaw whenever I ended up moving on to Catalyst. Yeah, which was crazy. I had an amazing partner in Daniel Sanchez Grant, who helped on the European side and APAC, and then had an amazing management team under me in North America. And it was really interesting, and it spanned, the strategic accounts down to SMB. So there was a long tail there, and really, really unique and interesting opportunity to see the spectrum of the different nuances of customer types and the service motions to best support those customers in retention and growth. And it's a good challenge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So you've seen the spectrum. I mean, if you said you were CS number 4 at Catalyst, is that right?
So I was like the fourth team, leader. Yeah, fourth team member, I guess. At the time, there were 3 in there whenever I joined as head of CS. Yeah.
So you've seen the spectrum there all the way up to a big global team at Envision. So that's fantastic. And I always love framing that up, because there's a lot of people, a lot of people who tune into these events, they're at different stages of it and are thinking about how to plan that process. And when do you start to make those changes? So if you were to start when you join Catalyst, like what's the first thing you do when you get in there and you're like, all right, we got to look at like, what do you start with? What's like kind of your framework for that?
I think the first was like roadshow with the customers. And I was just like, lay it on me straight, like good, bad, ugly, tell me everything. Like, I really want to come in here. This is my vision. I shared that with them. Like the vision I had for building out customer success as Catalyst was like, I don't want our customers just joining calls with our implementation team and our CSM team for the sake of like, how do we get value from your product? I want them joining because they're like, I want to see the best damn implementation manager that exists. And I want to see the best damn CSM and the best damn support experience, so that they take that and they go, hey team, this was the most mind-blowing experience I just had with a vendor that we use, a partner of ours. This is is the bar that I expect of us moving forward. Like that to me is the vision that I have for building customer success at Catalyst. So the first part was just sharing that very transparently and openly with our customers and go like, tell me where we're at. Like, how are we doing from your receiving end in terms of, meeting that bar? And that really helped, gave me a foundation of what are the themes that are coming up. Where's this team really strong? Where do we have some gaps and to focus down? And so I think that was priority one, just like hearing customers out, knowing, getting a foundation, lay of the land, and also hearing the team and understanding what their vision is for their role and how they perceive their success and delivering an amazing customer experience and impact for the business. And then bridging the commonalities and also the gaps and going back with like, okay, here's what I heard, here's what the plan is. And I think that, in the perfect world, you feel like you've got time. We can build the process, we can build the team. And we've honestly grown at such an incredibly fast rate that the process has not, like, it's been, as the typical building the plane as you fly it, analogy. And it's just been like, more than anything, we need really great quality bodies. And like hiring takes time, hiring takes intention, hiring takes like a massive investment. But if we don't have the people and if we don't hire those who can kind of roll with it, but already hold themselves to that bar or as close to it as possible, like we're up a creek without a paddle anyways. So that has really been the focus. But again, we had to adapt, right? We exceeded sales consistently and it was just like, whoa, geez, like kind of foreshadowing, we've got a much bigger problem if we don't have the team in place. Now we're at a position where I'm moving one of my implementation managers, Joe, who's amazing, into an operations role. Joe is going to be like so instrumental in helping us truly formalize those processes and also make sure that like as a Catalyst customer ourselves using the product that we truly are like using it to its full advantage and best in class. Like we should have an instance that any customer looks at and they're like, oh my God, build me that. Like that is what I need to operate my CS motion and have this just like well-oiled machine. So that's where we're getting to. But I would say like, it just feels like it's never fast enough. You're just kind of like, oh, come on, like I need more time.
Yeah, exactly. In your mix, did you guys have like some professional services with like, because I always love that topic because hot topic. Well, you know what? And like, I think a lot of people realize like, the VC said 80-20 rule, but I think there's always the goal is 80-20. And sometimes in your earlier stages, there's a little bit more PS than, the CS side of things. And like, how do you adapt? How do you plan? And how do you help move towards that direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the observations I had whenever I first joined, I was looking at our implementation team and what that experience was like. And while we didn't label it professional services, there was an approach that was very professional service-esque, which was like a lot of doing for customers. But what we realized when I met with these customers, the downstream implications is that they weren't independent and self-confident in operating the tool because we had kind of gone like, give us all your inputs and we'll just build this for you and ta-da, you've got this incredible. But in any CS organization, you're constantly iterating on your processes. You're constantly like fine tuning and revolving or adding a new motion. And so when we saw post onboarding, customers were like, oh, CSM, can you help me build this thing? We're like, why don't you know how to build this yourself? Like where's the disconnect there? Like we want to deliver a great experience, but we also think a great experience is you are so comfortable and confident in the tool. You don't have to waste a calorie emailing anyone on this team on how to do it. You're just like, boom, done, and off to the races. And so that was something that we kind of had to untrain the team to do, which is like, okay, like we've proven that this is a great product that can get customers to value and that they can do it independently. It's how we approach their education and enablement that's most critical to ensure that they're successful long-term with Catalyst. So there's that component, which was like kind of professional services, didn't label it that, kind of had to unlearn it because the downstream implications weren't positive for anyone. But then there's this whole other kind of like beast that's starting to emerge, which is like, we're getting much larger, higher, like true traditional enterprise clients. They very much are like, hey, I would love to pay you a lot of money to just like do this for me. And I have someone on my team who's going to be a dedicated resource and that's going to be their, initiative. But there's actually a significant value add for me to know that Catalyst offers a professional services operation. So that is very much, I would say, like in the last weeks, bubbling up and becoming like a theme. I feel like in CS, you're just constantly hit with so many data points that you have to kind of let it simmer for a minute to be like, is this just one person's idea of a concept that would be cute and cool? Or is this truly like a theme that's catching on? And like, now I need to like dedicate a little bit more serious attention to it. I would say we're kind of getting there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like the concept of like wanted PS and unwanted PS.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And yeah, it's an interesting concept. You were trying to accelerate your onboarding time, but in effect, it lowered your customer satisfaction because they felt clueless after the fact. So
yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
a little more pain in the training process. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other piece that we've noticed, and I've seen this in any customer success platform on the market that I've used in the past, is there's a massive change management motion. So like the first motion itself is like get the foundation in place, get the the data into the technology, get the workflows defined in your customer success platform. But then you have to go, hey, CS team, we bought this tool with the best of intentions to make your life more efficient and effective, etc. We're going to need you to disrupt all the habits that you've built, that you found confidence in terms of the method to your madness and how you've operated and produced in your role. And we're going to need you to do it here. And so that's a whole other separate motion to effectively onboarding a customer, is like not just the foundation in terms of the technology and getting that in place, but like actually helping disrupt the habits of their team and reestablish new habits in the platform against the workflows that are intended for them to be adopted.
No, very, very good point. And one of my favorite metrics, and I think it's one of the things a lot of founders, they'll go at, they look at like their ARPU, their CAC multiples, their LTV. And I think some people always overlook how important CS function is to the LTV ratios in your math, right? Like if you can extend the LTV of your client through an amazing experience and user experience, then your LTVs are going up and it changes all of your ratios quite considerably.
Agreed.
Do you have buy-in across your organization? Do people think that way? Like how do you guys kind of think about it?
Yeah. And I think I get like candidly a little lucky. Like, we are a CS organization. Our mission as a company is to bring CS to the center. I don't think there's anyone that's getting through Edward in our hiring process if they are not customer centric through and through and wholeheartedly believe that CS should be at the center of the company. So I would say I'm very fortunate that I have far fewer headwinds. I would say that I have to incur relative to what I've experienced in the past in other organizations. That said, in those higher headwind moments, I think there has been a matter of like understanding their point of view and where they're coming from and why they formed that opinion. Like what historically has led them to believe that that is true, not true, etc. And then also helping bridge the gap of like CS is in a very beneficial position in the sense that it has the opportunity to add significant value to every function of the organization, to bridge the gap between, customers and product, customers and sales and selling the right deals, customers and marketing, and to be able to get all of that advocacy out in the market and influence pipeline and demand gen and just overall brand awareness, et cetera. And so I think it's always about understanding like what's most meaningful to them in their role, and then going, and what do I have in CS within my control to help influence them that shows a little bit more of direct value relative to what's helping them move the needle in their respective function.
Yeah, and good point. And I think it's an interesting perspective because it does matter. Previous experiences of the founding team really influence and drive some of that. Sometimes it's later adoption or having a tool that might help them adopt some of these best practices also that might kind of get them there.
I think the one other thing that I'll just add is like bringing your customers to the forefront. Like, yeah, Sid can preach until like I'm blue in the face, but put a customer in front of anyone on the team and have them open Q&A and just have a very vulnerable, transparent conversation. And all of a sudden it hits differently. And all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I get it. So I think that that's something too, that in CS to just be the conduit to facilitating those engagements with the broader team is a big value add for everyone and really helps CS, one, understand just how disconnected oftentimes other people in the organization are, not by virtue of like they're not doing their job. It's just our job is so front facing in terms of the customer. And two, gives those folks that are not so front facing to the organization that exposure so they can feel the realities of what we're up against day in and day out.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I'm seeing one question here. I'm just going to ask one that's in the chat here. And I think it's super interesting. So like, what sorts of specific challenges did you find that you're trying to disrupt from a CSM when you integrate your software into their world? Like, what are the differences and how do you overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think with a lot of customers, this is very like kind of basic, but where does all the information live relative to customers? Like you're a CSM, you're taking notes, you're getting information, you're getting context on the account. And that information is so critical to the, executive stakeholders, management, et cetera. And I remember that was the light bulb moment for me at Catalyst. I was evaluating Catalyst and I was like, to me as a CSM, there was always a trade-off. It was always like, I could invest a calorie in a customer, making sure that they're happy, building that relationship, successfully driving the outcomes and value that they're looking to. Or I can invest the calorie doing the administrative overhead, updating all of the information in Salesforce or whatever CSP I had. And it was like my weekend project more often than not, or like a light night project. Like it was just never part of my day-to-day workflow. It was like, I'm all calories in the customer bucket, and then I'll do that as a second nature. But now as a leadership role, especially in a leadership role, I understand just mission critical how integral that information is to know. God forbid a CSM on my team left tomorrow and I'm like, I know nothing about this account or anything that's happened. Like if I don't have a single source of truth for that, that is incredibly disruptive. And with Catalyst, that to me was the light bulb moment where everything was so integrated and centralized that it just reduced those fire drill moments that are so stressful in CS. And so I think that is one of the very common habits that need to be disrupted, is just like note taking. And it sounds so basic, but the way that Catalyst has approached notes and your ability to inline update all of the information, contract value, sentiment, like whatever field you want updated, you can do that in your workflow while talking to a customer. And you remove that like old SID motion of like, this is a whole other task that I have. So I think what we do as part of our implementation on onboarding is we actually interview the CSMs. And we do that to try and just build some rapport, but also more importantly, understand their world, right? As a manager, as a leader, like with the best of intentions, you're buying a platform that you hope is going to help improve your team's efficiency, their overall job satisfaction, the effectiveness of their role. But at the end of the day, you need the CSMs bought in that they believe it too. And for us to really spend time going, walk me through your day. How do you prioritize your time? What are the tools that you're using? Where are your headwinds? Where are the inefficiencies? What are the pains? Like, tell us about that. And we're going to help onboard your company, your team on Catalyst in a way that's going to solve for that. And then often that CSM is the biggest advocate when we go to onboard to the rest of the team and launch, because they're like, I told them this was a pain and this was a pain. And I was in 5 spreadsheets and like data was here. So I think that there's a spectrum of different, workflows that are disrupted in all different places, but notes is a big one. Number of spreadsheets we see. Whew, Google's in business for a reason. That is definitely another one, just these kind of creative processes that happen. And the quickest time to get it done was a spreadsheet at one point in time. That would be the other one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, is that kind of, when you talk about Catalyst softwares like ICP and who you're going after, is that the usual transition, Excel sheets or whatever it might be, and then that kind of shifts into your solution? Is that typically what you disrupt?
There's definitely a motion there, and it spans beyond just like, the Google Sheets of the world or Excel sheets. It's like just data is everywhere in every different tool. And I know, like from my own personal experience as a CSM back in the day, I mean, I was probably hopping between 6 different tools. There was a BI tool for data. There was some admin tool that we had internally to, give new user access. There was Salesforce for contract information. There was like a customer success platform in the mix that didn't have that information mapping into it. And so one of the biggest pains, like for starters, the foundational pain that we're addressing is just like a single source of truth for all of that information, so that you as a CSM, you as a CS leader, open your laptop in the morning and you're like, boom, Catalyst is going to dictate my day. It's going to help me understand the health of my accounts. It's going to prescribe to me the workflows that I need to be executing against based on those accounts, and helps really drive that forward.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess really that Excel sheet might have been the right place at a certain time in your company. And then as you evolve and grow and scale, you have to recognize like, cool, this doesn't work anymore and I got to grow up, get a real system in place.
Totally. And the other thing that's great that we've seen is like that maturity, right? That it is a time and a place where that works and that works efficiently. But our most successful customers are ones who have like, spreadsheeted the world. And then they're like, now we know our process. And then they come to Catalyst and they're like, we now need to operationalize this in a far more efficient, effective fashion versus like, we have no process. We have no idea of what process we want. So like, hope a tool fixes it. It's like, ooh, we actually have to like make sure we iron that out first. And then absolutely we can help you operationalize that. So that I would say is another learning we've had over time in terms of, a customer we can set up for success out of the gate is making sure they have enough of those foundational workflows defined for their team. And we're just helping them kind of enhance it to the next level operationally versus like clean slate, like Sid, 6-8 months ago at Catalyst, where we had nothing in terms of process or very little. I really wouldn't have been the best situation to really get the full value.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Going back to one of these questions and just like, I'm just loving it. Best practices from a CS company. This is just amazing. So just in terms of when you're implementing your onboarding and your CS training and like you recognize some of those things, like how do you guys view that? Like what would you call is like your best practices when you're going through your onboarding? And training those teams up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts most critically with sales, to be perfectly honest. We actually just had a really great conversation with our sales team this morning. And it was like, in CS, we talk about what is the story we want to be able to tell? What is the story we want to be able to tell coming out of onboarding for our customer? What's the story we want to be able to tell at their first QBR, their second QBR, their third QBR, their renewal discussion? And we can't tell a compelling story if we don't know where they're starting. So we actually want to know, like, what is the reality of where they are today? 500 spreadsheets. No one knows what they're doing. Process. There's no way to hold accountability to it. Like it's wild. No, everyone's getting a little flustered, a little frustrated. We're growing so quickly. We need standardization. So that's, I think the first piece is just making sure that we as a CS team are prescriptive with our sales team of what is the information we actually want and need to know as a customer is handed off to us. One, so they're not repeating themselves, but two, so we're setting ourselves up for success to be able to share a really compelling story and a quick win out of the gate in that onboarding. So I would say like that's definitely one strategy. The second is then taking that information and doing something with it, which is like, okay, implementation manager goes from the sales, rep, here's what I heard to be the 3 biggest pain points that you're experiencing today. As part of your implementation, this is how we're going to focus, you're laying the foundation and getting that in place. Of the 3, here's the one that I think we're going to hit out of the gate. How does that align to you in terms of priorities, working with the customer to make sure that's the case? And then boom, we've got that story at launch and are able to get a quick win and provide that like forward momentum. And then from there, the CSM is like building off of that. So they take the story from sales. They now have a new chapter to add based on the onboarding. And then now it's about building the additional chapters to the book thereafter, building off of that momentum coming out of implementation. So that's it. I think the training itself all comes down to that. It's like these really nitty gritty things of like, training our onboarding to ask, like, what is the story you want to be able to tell, getting a customer out of onboarding? And also, what is success launching a customer? I think so often you're like, woo, we launched. And you're like, boom, boom, like fireworks. And it's like, but did we launch as successfully as we would have hoped to have launched a customer? And I think one, it goes back to that quick win story. The other thing we do at Catalyst is we have a health score. There's 3 components that go into that health score. One is of the seats assigned to customer success team members, how many of them are actively being used? The second is we're a customer success platform. CSM should live and breathe, die in Catalyst day in and day out. So in an average work week of 5 days, on average, how many days out of 5 a week are CSM, CS leaders actively using Catalyst? And the third is sentiment, which is we ask customer, if your renewal was tomorrow, would you renew? It's like, yes, green light, we're good to go and we're healthy. Or like, oh, no, that's not the case. I wouldn't renew. And we've got to dig in to better understand why. But what we do is when we launch a customer, we share with them their health score. We like actually say, you are neutral, or you are at risk, or you are green. And here's how we calculate your health. And let's talk about unpacking that data to go like, okay, here are all the folks you assign seats to. here's the, naughty group of
Right.
like, they're not in there, what's happening there. And here are your rock stars. Like, here are your power users. They're in there crushing. How do we get the rest of the team adopting in the fashion that they did? So the data is really powerful and the customers are very positively responsive. Even like one of my most successful emails is I'll get a notification in Catalyst saying a customer went at risk. I'll email that customer right away and go like, data doesn't always tell the full story, but I'm concerned and want to make sure you're getting full value from our platform. You were just flagged as at risk. Here's why, adoption is 2 out of 5 days, not 5 out of 5 days. Like, can we jump on a call so I can help better understand what we can do to support? And they're like, oh, yes, you're right. We have been like, kind of dropping the ball on our end. Some more changes. This is happening. That's happening. Yes, we'd love to talk. So I think that those are a couple strategies in the toolbox to think about.
It's so amazing getting a call from your CSM company about CSM, about their lack of performance of CSM and how their customers are probably churning because of that also.
I know. I mean, the number of times customers are like, oh, thanks for that email. I'm just going to steal that. I hope you don't mind. And it's no, like that's the greatest form of flattery. If we do something and a customer messages to say, hey, Sid, we're going to jack the communication you just sent us. I'm like, run with it. Take it. That's a good sign for us.
I mean, and that's perfect. And that's a great example, but like, that's really thoughtful of how proactive you guys are and leveraging the data from your systems to be, I mean, I think the keywords I saw there was transparency. I love the transparency that you guys have. That is amazing. Being able to talk to it that clearly, that's super helpful. The other thing I was going to ask just around you guys, like, as you scale also, how do you think about specializing those roles and like, tiering your customers or segmenting to small business, medium business? Like, when do you start to approach that type of thought process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, on the role specialization, that has really been informed by, again, listening to the team and listening to our customers, and also knowing what the bigger vision is of what we're trying to achieve and how do we actually set people up for success to be able to do that. And I think one really interesting, just like nugget I learned early talking to our customers was, when I did my initial roadshow when I joined, is like, they were like, look, Catalyst is incredibly flexible, and that's a welcome change in terms of the platforms on the market. However, it's so flexible. I almost like believe that I don't know that I'm getting its full value because I have to imagine other really creative customers have done really creative things with Catalyst and I could be learning from them. And so there was just like this constant theme of like customers saying, I want to learn from other customers. I want to see Catalyst for Catalyst and how you're using it, Sid, with your team. And so, when I looked at the team and I looked at the scope of a CSM and I looked at all the responsibilities they have on their plate, I was like, is it realistic to believe that I'm setting them up for success and inherently their customers up for success if I add this as one more thing on their list of like, just crank out this content, build these little stories, like, all of this thing. And I was like, no, like, I'm not. Yes, they will be at the source of helping to raise and surface those, but do I need someone who can really help lean into this and run with it? And so I built a role, customer experience program manager. His name is Ben Lee. He's phenomenal. And he literally just yesterday launched a new digital headquarters that comes with templates and 2-minute quick tip videos and inspiration of other customers and how they're using Catalyst. And he's been able to do that I think he's been here 3 months max. And he has this whole library full. I mean, the time it would have taken for the rest of the team to try and produce a fraction of that output, if that was just one more thing added on their plate, was like, no. And now with the new email functionality, Ben's teeing up based on data he's getting. He's then serving up this content to users in the platform. And our focus there is really driving that, middle kind of component of the health score I was talking about in the day-to-day activation of like 5 out of 5 days a week is what we're going for. So he's now serving up prescriptive content to users based on what they are and are not using in the tool with these quick 2-minute videos, 3 minutes, like, here's what you're missing out on.
It's awesome. And it like goes back to that earlier point, like gong content for salespeople is just like the metadata, which is, and you guys now have that role also, which is just so cool and so awesome to consume some of that. Cause exactly what does CS look like at Catalyst? That's the best question you could ask.
Exactly.
what does sales outreach look like at Gawk? It's the same question, right?
I know, it's true. And I think in your question around segmentation, I mean, if anyone has tips for me, I'd love this, right? Like, I think it's hard in CS not to be reactive to it because, at the end of the day, I see our model adjusting and the segmentation of our customer base adjusting, but it's purely reactive to like more data points, I think, that we have. Like, we've signed on a number of big, large enterprise clients, and we understand the importance and the expectation of the experience they expect of us, number one, and two, like the lift it requires to make them successful. I mean, we're talking, an implementation that used to be like a quick little like, whoop, yep, foundations in place, good to go,
Right.
to like we have a 3-wave global rollout approach to our CS team. And you're like, oh yeah, how we did it before is definitely not going to be sufficient for you. Like, we've got to elevate our game, but I also have to make sure I'm segmenting our customer base and managing my team's capacity and their books of business to allow, the CSMs to be able, and implementation managers to be able to support a customer at the degree of the experience we want to deliver without compromising them and just saying like, deliver it to be exceptional and like hope to God you're doing okay with your 50 other customers. Like, that's just not going to be a realistic situation. So I think that's a big piece, but also understanding the CAC and understanding the business metrics and also understanding the trade-offs, and then being able to communicate that effectively to your CFO, to your CEO, and across the business of like, best case scenario, this is what this looks like. Worst case scenario, here are the trade-offs. Where as a company are we aligning that we are willing to land in terms of this? Because if you're telling me to build out the best MCS organization that's in existence and an experience that our customers are only going to rave about, this is what it's going to take. And for every headcount I don't get, or every corner that's cut, we just have to be on the same page that we're getting further away from the vision, and we have to just be okay with that. And so, very often as you frame it accordingly, that people are like, oh, actually, yeah, I don't want to that idea was better. We're okay. Back to plan A. And I'm like, okay, great.
Go. So we're all aligned. All right. Good.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure we were all still in lockstep with one another.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're totally right. It's like something that people overlook so much. Like a lot of leaders will focus on new customer acquisition and new logos while not taking care of the ones they have, which I mean, leads me to my next question in just around churn and how you guys kind of look at churn and, best in class. How do you guys approach it?
Yeah. I mean, churn is inevitable, right? But churn is also indicators to the business. That's how I look at it, right? I mean, no one ever wants to see a customer churn, but it would be unrealistic, I think, for us to expect that's never going to happen. The question, I had a great manager, my first manager out of the gate when I came out of school, and he said, Sid, make a mistake once, no problem. Make the same mistake twice, well, then we're going to have a chat. We got an issue. And I kind of see it that way with churn, right? Like if we churn a customer because they had a poor experience, because we missed set expectations in the sales process, because the product didn't deliver to the value that they needed, okay. But most critical is that we all need to make sure that that's being communicated and that we are accountable to that. And we, again, know what the trade-offs are. If we lost a customer because ABC product feature was not built and that was integral to what they needed in a customer success platform, then we all just have to be aligned as an organization that we know that that's the trade-off to churn, but that the bigger picture and direction that we're heading aligns to the market that we're after. And that is an okay trade-off. What you don't want is to go oh my God, we just churned a customer that we totally should have made successful and could be successful and of value. And I think that's where you have to just be very open-minded to your assessment of that. But also in CS, you play such an integral role sitting on all of that data and that information to direct those signals to the business accordingly, to understand, looking at healthy customers, why are they renewing? There's so much insight in a healthy customer and a customer that chooses to renew, or a customer of ours that just was can we please sign a 3-year deal? And we're yes, tell us everything. What is going into this thought process? Because that's as powerful as someone who's hey, I'm going to churn. And I think so often in CS, you kind of get shoved into oh my God, churn. But it's also and what about these healthy customers? And what is it about them that is looking so good and working so well? And that I think really helps us inform our ICP and the customer profile that we're after, that we can make successful, that doesn't take a monumental lift on CS to be able to do. So some thoughts on churn.
Do you guys we were talking about that transition process from sales over to CS.
Mm.
Do you like when you talk about the perfect customer, because some people just match your ICP and you're like, you guys need this so badly.
Yeah.
And sometimes sales is like, I don't know why they bought it, but they say they need it, but they're really keen on it. Do you guys like score that in the transition to be like, flagging as like a high churn probability? Do you do any of that
Literally
stuff?
something that we just talked about this morning, which was, and I think our ICP is pivoting. We actually have a big initiative. I have a call later today on it, actually, where we're just, because we set an ICP and it was very much oriented around the size of a customer success team. And then what we've seen is like, we kind of flexed a little bit on the ICP because, to your point, customers are like, don't worry, I know what I need this. And you're like, okay, great. But then we're like, and then they're very successful. And we're like, so is our ICP accurate or not? So now we're kind of stripping away our previous like perception of what ICP was to be like, no, now that we have more data, we have a lot more customers, what do we now know about these and how can we kind of reorient ourselves to an ICP? So I think on the CS side, you have to be open to flexing a little bit, because if you pigeonhole yourself, like you're not doing there's risk and reward to it, right? You don't want to like blow it wide open and be like, oh my God, we just created a complete firestorm over and over and over again. But you do also want to think for the business and the longevity of the business. Can we be a little open-minded to letting the odd ones, come through? But to your point, an awareness of, hey, this is kind of a test account. Can they be successful even though they don't necessarily fit the typical profile that we've seen?
Right. Yeah. Because obviously you want to increase your TAM that you can go after. So
exactly
those edge cases, if you can figure out how to make them successful, say a lot for sure.
Yeah. And I think for us, it's just like, who are the customers that it's just like in and out in terms of onboarding and just like are easy because there's such a strong fit to the product that we have and the pains that they're looking to solve for, and that it is very quick time to value for them.
Another question just on retention marketing. Do you guys think about like marketing that way to help reduce your churn levels?
It's a good question.
It sounds like what you guys are thinking about with it is a lot around the some of your scores, your monthly check-ins, and the transparency that you have. Does your marketing team come into that? Like, how closely are you working with marketing with some of your strategies around reducing your churn? I guess is the other way to ask the question.
This would be another prime example of like, God bless Mike Roberts, our head of CS. I'm like, Mike, I'm so overwhelmed, like with underwater. I'm like, I promise you, I studied marketing. I believe in marketing. I know the importance of marketing. I worked for a marketing company two companies ago. But it was really like, how do we truly maximize this? And there's been a lot of partnership opportunities with marketing that have been phenomenal. I mean, there's been webinars that they've done, there's case studies that they've published, there's the coaching corner program that maps not just customers, but everyone in the industry in terms of CS leaders with CS professionals that want to be mentored and pairing them up. And that's been a huge value add that we can bring to our customers. We've got an initiative with our marketing team on G2 crowd reviews. So when we get an NPS score, we actually map it to marketing, then reaching out to ask if they would do a G2 crowd review if they gave a promoter score. And that gave us like 15 in like 5 minutes the other day, which was amazing. So that's part of the strategy. But all that to be said, there's definitely more work that we can do. There's definitely a big opportunity to partner with marketing. One thing that we've recently done, and Siobhan, an amazing manager on my team, was the one who really initiated this, was she's identified kind of the wheelhouse of each of her team members. And Diana DeJesus, who's an amazing CSM on our team, her like wheelhouse is marketing. She's done a phenomenal job building her own personal brand on LinkedIn. And we're like, Diana, how do you feel about being the representative of CS at Catalyst to partner with our marketing team and like really like bridge that connection? You spearhead it in partnership with marketing, and you basically come back to us and say like, here's the opportunity, here's what I think we need to do, et cetera. And then Gloria, another amazing CSM, she's like, geeks out on the product, like in just the best way. She holds us to such a high bar. She's very intentional in her communication. So she's our like conduit with product. It's like, Gloria, you're the go-to, like give them all the feedback they need and want. So that's something that I would say, as we've been able to get a little bit more, bodies behind us, seeing everyone's unique kind of areas of expertise, their interest areas, and mapping them across the organization to help us bring our mission of like bringing CS to the center has gone a long way. And marketing being one of of those who will benefit immensely from a stronger partnership with us.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And, bringing them into mix, and I guess for one, consistency across your org to having the same delivery. And I know for a lot of the founders who are moving at extremely fast pace, your products, your messaging, your ICE, everything shifts and it needs to flow through the organization, and how important that is too.
Yeah. And I think focus, right? Especially in CS. I mean, across any organization, there's just like a whole lot of noise. And if we all know Diana's our gal for marketing on the CS side, boom, like focus. And if Diana knows she's the gal for marketing, focus for her, not the Diana, you're also for product and you're also for sales and you're also for marketing. Like, all of a sudden she's got 7 jobs and you're just like, and do I get to talk to a customer today? Because that's where I want to be focused. So that piece is a benefit as well.
Yeah, it's super, super helpful on that. I would love to get, this is a topic that, I'm excited to get a little more education around, just around like, some of the KPIs and the metrics you put in place. So like your NPS, your CSAT, and I'm not even familiar with that. So we can dive further into that and referrals. Why don't we start with Net Promoter Score? Like maybe even start at the basics. Like, what
NPS is so interesting. So we do NPS. Candidly, between you and I'm on the fence about NPS. I always have been, because part of me is like, what does it allow you to do? Because if you ask someone like, hey, how likely are you to refer us? Well, there's a lot that goes in through my mind, at least when I'm asked that question. I mean, it could be the product, it could be the experience, it could have been the sale, it could be the marketing. I mean, there's so many things. So you get like an 8 and you're like, okay, well, what the hell do we do about that? Like, I don't know. Like, and then the number of times and someone's like, oops, I didn't mean to give you that. And you're like, oh, geez. And you're just like rabbit holing. And so I think that I struggle with NPS for that reason. I'm more like, hit me with the facts so I can take action. And I think that I struggle with NPS because the action isn't so clear to me and it's not so direct. Like if you're a 2 and I'm a 6, what action are we taking? Like, I really don't know, other than, hey, Russ, you want to get on a call with me and spend time on why you're a 2? And then you're like, you're hiding. So for me, like, I actually am more in favor of the customer sat, like the CSAT. So that's kind of the other option that you threw out there. And the reason that I think is a little bit more attractive is because it allows you to be a little bit more specific and intentional with the questions that you're asking. I think generically the NPS is like, how willing are you to refer us? Whereas like with the CSAT, you're really getting to like the depths of like the questions, their overall score on the relationship, and you can get down to the specificity. So we actually do CSAT, at multiple stages of a customer's life cycle. So for example, whenever a customer has launched, we send them a CSAT after their onboarding to get an understanding of how their onboarding experience was. How was their experience with their implementation manager? And that's really helpful because it allows us to focus in and be very intentional. So for example, coming out of onboarding, customer gets their CSAT survey, and it allows us to understand how happy were they with their implementation manager? How knowledgeable did they feel like their implementation manager was in relation to CS best practices? How knowledgeable were they about the product? How resourceful were they in helping connect them with other customers? Like there's these kind of dedicated questions that we have. And then that allows us to like own in on onboarding and be like, holy smokes, what we saw most recently in our score was like the data integrations. And the customers found that to be the most challenging part of like, I want to be super seamless. And then we rolled out a UI for data warehouse for customers to self-serve themselves to map all of their data into Catalyst. And now the surveys thereafter that data warehouse launch has been immensely higher. And so it allows us to be very intentional and focused. And again, if we had this in an NPS and someone gave me a 5, like I would have no idea that the 5 is rooted in the pain associated with mapping their data, and that the solution is for us to work with our product team to develop a UI that would allow customers to self-serve their ability to map their data from different systems into Catalyst. But then we were able to figure that out. And then the data showed us that in fact, that truly has impacted their satisfaction in their onboarding experience. So that's something that like, if you're my 2 cents and recommendation is like CSAT, very valuable. Being very intentional about where in the life cycle stages you're delivering that, so you can focus in on those particular areas and up level in that accordingly.
Yeah, best practices from CS, from a
there
CS company. CSAT wins, I think. All right.
Exactly. NPS going out of business. No, just kidding.
NPS, yeah. Not so much NPS, CSAT. I think that's where it's at. And it makes sense. I mean, I'm more like, I look at the sales and the sales funnel, and like we track every component of the sales funnel throughout.
Yeah.
Well, why can't we be as deliberate with the CS process and have that CSAT score throughout to be able to score it and have similar metrics to make clients happy? And that's a great point.
Comparison.
I think, yeah, it's a great way to kind of divide and conquer and figure out where your weaknesses are, because that's really what funnel tracking is in sales.
Totally.
You're trying to figure out where your weaknesses are so you can improve them. And which is the same idea, you're trying to increase the overall satisfaction of your clients. So
yeah,
you
can be super strong on the top of funnel, but just getting crushed mid funnel. And to your point, like you just got to own in on the mid funnel to understand what's happening there. Why is that not converting to leads that are closing? And how do we get that to the bottom of the funnel?
Yeah, for sure. So CSAT is a lagging indicator. Mm-hmm. And what would you guys use as your leading indicators to get ahead of it?
Actually, that's a good question. So maybe that's debatable in terms of whether CSAT is a leading or lagging indicator, in the sense that if you have it as disciplined, as what we kind of just talked through, it's more leading than it is lagging if it's consistently a touch point that you're getting a pulse on, because it would be lagging if it was like, oh my God, at the renewal, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we're super unhappy, we're churning. But it's leading if you actually knew, at the 3-month mark, the 6-month mark, and the 9-month mark, leading up to that renewal conversation, that they weren't in a good place. But you had some runway. So I think like maybe CSAT falls in the leading if I were to like have to pick a bucket. But data is also a big one for us. I mean, so the lagging indicator, you've got the net dollar retention, gross retention also being critical. I think that's really, really important, is to not lose sight of the gross retention in addition to the net dollar retention, and where you're able to see growth. What you don't want is to be like bleeding customers, but having it masked by the fact that you're growing every other customer by 200%. That would be problematic. Right. So making sure that you've got those two on lock is really, really important. For us as well, the adoption and the stickiness of the product, right? At the end of the day, if a customer success team has their team in there 5 out of 5 days a week, and it's, obviously an integral tool, then that's going to be a good leading indicator that we're heading in the right direction. Manny at Outreach, CEO of Outreach, great guy. You should get him on your podcast. He was speaking with Catalyst, and one of the stories he shared, which I loved, was early days Outreach. The product went down. Obviously CS nightmare, like nobody wants this, right? And they had a customer that called and just like kind of lost their mind. It was basically like, I just had to let my sales team go for lunch. Like, you got to get this product back up and running stat. And so obviously every engineer, everyone in the company, all hands on deck, hustling their tails off to get this done. And then they get it back up. And what they realized shortly thereafter, as they were reflecting on the situation, was that their tool was mission critical to that sales team. That sales leader was like, there is no option for this tool not to be running, because this team doesn't function without it. And they were like, that's when we knew we were really onto something, that we were a mission critical tool. And without it, this team was kind of screwed. And so I think that's what the story really resonated with me, and how I think about coaching my team through making Catalyst a mission critical tool for all of our customers. And if they're not in there 5 out of 5 days a week, the question's why. And oftentimes it's like, ooh, we still have our at-risk motion happening in a spreadsheet. And it's like, okay, let's chat about that. Talk me through your little spreadsheet hack, and let's talk about how we operationalize that and bring that into Catalyst. And then all of a sudden you just take a whole new motion and put it in the tool that is now driving a mission critical motion for that CS organization. So that piece is really, really instrumental, is like asking yourself, like, what is it about your tool that is mission critical, and how are you making sure in CS, whether in onboarding or post onboarding, you are continuing to feed into the importance of that mission criticalness to help drive that stickiness overall.
Yeah, makes sense. One other one I'd love, and I know we're running short on time, but I got
we are 3 minutes.
Couple of these big questions. There's no way we're gonna get through them all. But like CS, do you guys own like client referrals? Do you guys own, like, do you own that program, or do you have a segmented team that kind of sits in parallel with you, or how do you
Yeah,
guys look
so
at that?
we have a system built out within Catalyst to identify a customer as referenceable. That is then something accessible to our wholesale team where they are able to go and access that. We ran a referral program that was actually initiated by our marketing team. And the most recent program we've ran around advocacy was G2 Crowd Reviews, where we basically took all of the 9 and 10 NPS promoters and then followed up with them and said, hey, thank you so much for the positive sentiment. Like, would you be open to a G2 Crowd review? And that really helped us drive some of that internal publicity in terms of promotion to external sources, which we know G2 Crowd plays an integral role in helping, different buyers in the market assess the different tools and their confidence level in those tools.
Yeah, no, super helpful for sure. No, that's a great answer. And what about on the upsell side of things? I guess that's all owned within your team as well?
Yes, that is today owned, although everything's essentially automated. So the contracts are kind of baked in terms of where the true up motion is. We have an automated process on a quarterly basis to assess, have customers exceeded their allotted amount? If yes, there's a proactive communication. That communication actually is vetted by the CSM first, just to make sure customers in a happy place, we're in good shape. We don't want to, if there's a sensitivity that came up, we don't want to be like, and boom, here's your additional price tag. So there's a really good coordination between finance and CS to ensure that experience is well polished. But yes, that is on us.
Fantastic. No, that's awesome. That's super helpful. I got to ask, just for the audience and everybody who wants to subscribe to it, I mean, now that we know that we have the best practices of CS from a CS company, how can they get your content, your company's content?
It's a good question. So the Catalyst blog, I need to do a lot more action there. I think my first 2 months I had some bandwidth to do it. Now I'm like Mike Roberts again. He's all over. He's like, Sid, back in the game. So we're gonna get there. But that's definitely a great place to check out for sure. Is Catalyst blog, and we showcase a lot of customers and their great insights. I mean that is one of the most amazing components of this opportunity for me was to supercharge my own knowledge and expertise in customer success. I don't know everything. I haven't seen everything. And there's so much for me to learn. And there's so many nuances to customer success that it's an amazing opportunity to get to speak with my peers each and every day in the market and learn about how they're approaching it and what their lessons learned are. So we do a great job of showcasing customers and their CS best practices. It's not just Catalyst through and through. So good resource for you.
Fantastic. Well, I'm hoping, some people sign up for that and they gain more of it. I'm going to go do it myself because I loved what you were talking about today. It was fantastic.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for sharing all of your insights. I learned a ton today, especially, CSAT's the way to go. So that's one of my takeaways.
Amazing. I appreciate it. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Russ. Great to connect with you.
Yeah, thanks, Sydney. And thanks, everyone. Another Traction episode brought to you by Boast Launch Academy. Boast, we're automating your R&D tax credits. Check us out. We've got more Traction webinars on our events page within the boast.ai website. There's over 150 of these now with great leaders across all tech companies. So come check it out. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks again, Sydney. We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.